You've stumbled on the podcast number 123. What does it take to be a good person? Let's find out together.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome, everybody. We have Brandon Montero with us again today. And his last podcast with us, the interview that we did, was so popular that he's back with his beard, all the looks, everything, all of his wisdom, and the guidance that he's going to give us and has been able to give us in the past. So we hope everybody's doing well. Hope you're succeeding in life and just absolutely living the dream. We're so glad to have you on this podcast. And so I want to kick this off right now. Brandon, what are you excited about in life right now?
I am excited about my own path to personal growth. I feel like it continues to provide new avenues to me to grow as a person. And I feel that in doing so and being dedicated to doing so, it just continues to enrich me and in turn, my relationships, my friendships, the people that I have been able to draw into my life, I feel like have just, added so much wonderful value and value back and forth where I'm meeting people that I really align with. And my prospects for what life looks like 5 years, 10 years down the road just continues to evolve and really make me happy for who I've turned into, who I've become, and what I get to share with others and what that's opened up for me as far as what I receive from others as well.
I like what you mentioned there because I did a podcast, I think it was 2 days ago, where I was summarizing some concepts from the book, The Focal Point, and he talks in there about simplifying our lives, getting leverage, meaning leveraging our resources, but also getting leverage against our fears, and then heading into a direction where we're in this multiplying effect. And I feel like the things that I used to want to do would take 10 years or 5 years. And now that's starting to narrow where I'm like, where am I going to be in a year? It's going to be completely different. So much more progress, so much more opportunities. I feel the exact same way. So let's get you to introduce the topic. Well, actually, first of all, let's thank some folks. So the interviews with Brandon get twice as many downloads than any of the other podcasts. And so I'm taking that as a sign that people really love that content. I also am very proud that we're able to cover topics that deal with how we can show up better in life and at home. And then that will translate to us showing up better at work. So thank you to all the listeners out there that are helping us. So here we go, Brandon. I'm going to be quiet and ask you to start us off with a statement that will bring conflict into our interview, and then tell us a story to back it up, and we'll get into our discussion.
The conflict
meaning interesting, movie-like, oh my gosh, what's happening here? Let's talk about it kind of conflict, not negativity.
Gotcha. The topic is what does it mean to be a good person? I think the conflicting value that I want to bring up is we have in our society so many preset templates that tell us what's good and what's bad. And I would like to assert that many of our templates can help us to a point, but at another point could strongly mislead us in the way that we grow and develop into a decent human being.
I like that. So what's your story?
A story that I have would be my own experience with religion. And I want to quantify that first by saying I find there's so much value in the way that I was raised religiously as far as how I want to help as a person, how I view assisting people who can't help themselves. Just, there's so many things that I learned and I just thought, that's what I'm going to do. But here's another point. In the particular faith that I was raised in, there was a belief that any other religion outside of that specific faith or that specific church was a false religion. So it was the only true doctrine. And so any other doctrine outside of that was essentially false religion. And if it was false religion had an origin with, and it was a Christian faith, an origin with the opposite of that. So they were essentially saying if you weren't, in this church or didn't go to this, subscribe to these doctrines, you were essentially, following like a faith that originated with the devil. It's a strong statement to make. And as I grew up, I feel that I met people in my life who were genuinely good people that were not a part of that particular church, to the point where you couldn't tell me that they were bad people. In fact, I knew, by having friends in that church or, even viewing some of the members that were higher up in that church, this person was more humble, or this person was more honest, or this person was more empathetic. And I could truly say, I feel that this person from outside of the church was good. And not that I was casting judgment on, members of the church itself, but in contrast, you can't tell me this person is bad. And so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. What makes a person good? What makes a person bad? And, what is the spectrum of that? And what can we as individuals strive to be?
As I'm listening, and the hard part about listening is that you don't get to formulate your thoughts, so bear with me here. But as you're listening, one thing that I feel like I learned was that we can appreciate the beauty and not have to go to that polarizing point. So a quick example for me, and I've felt this way, any company, right? If somebody says, I'm leaving the company, what does everybody do? They're like, oh, I'm mad now. Oh, you betrayed us. Oh, and they're distant and they're emotional and they're like unforgiving. Why? Like, if we were in it to help that person or that family or do what's best for them, why are we upset? And so my entire career, actually, because I've never had a problem with this, with polarizing in that way, somebody told me they were leaving. I'm like, well, if it's better for your family, what can I do to support you? Do you need a recommendation? All good. Hey, call me. We're always here. And I've always been blown away. Why do people freak out when somebody leaves the company? And I think and I'd like your thoughts, I think it's because they're afraid of losing something. It wasn't, I'm here for the person, for the family. It was, I want what you give to me. And if you're going to leave, you're taking something away. And I think when churches or religions do the same thing, I hear at church all the time, oh, don't move, don't move. Why not move? Like, is it because you're going to go to a different location, to a different building, and you've taken something from me? If it's better for your family, why wouldn't I be happy about that? Thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree on that strongly. And, kind of going back to some of the relationship discussions that we had talked about, a lot of times when a relationship ends, people are just extremely angry with each other immediately. But what's funny about that is, one person has determined, or probably both, to be realistic when a relationship ends. Hey, this doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't have that good feeling, etc. I think that it could be better for both of us. I think you could be happier. I think I could be happier. And then they want to part ways, and someone could be just furious about it because, number one, people tend to view it as if they were saying, you yourself are not good enough as a being, not just for me, but not even for yourself. So there's that, push to take it personally. Second, that commodity. Well, now this commodity is gone from me. I don't have it. Someone else will have it and will be better for it. And I don't have an immediate replacement for it. And I feel that's like the scarcity concept, or, the thought of, now there's a commodity missing. What do I do? There's a hole here. Really drives a lot of people to become polarized immediately.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts before I throw out an idea there?
No, go ahead.
So just going back into my life a little bit, and if you ever ask Katie about this, she'll give you the full rundown, but I've been fairly intolerant in my past. because I'm fairly conservative when it comes to morals and finances, but really am probably a libertarian at heart, meaning I just feel like everyone, leave each other alone, let everyone do what they want to be doing, right? And stop controlling certain things. But because when I had kids, I'm like, okay, I need to raise my children and I want them to have these good thoughts and these good concepts. It turned into a fear-based warning and dramatic kind of dogmatic preaching against other things versus sharing the wonderful things that I had. So if I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but like I was just really intolerant of certain political beliefs or intolerant of other ways of living, even though I grew up in California and I was growing up to like love and respect all different kinds of people and belief systems and things like that. And I realized, and I learned this at Tony Robbins, if I would just stop being afraid of my kids thinking certain things or making their own choices or have somebody politically try and take something away from me, if I could stop being afraid, then I could stop the hatred and the lack of empathy and the lack of understanding and the lack of acceptance. And it's really kind of funny. One of these days I want to watch this with you, Brandon, but the Netflix Taylor Swift special is what really was like the last straw for me. She's talking about fighting for women's rights and tolerance and acceptance and her accepting herself and not worrying about Facebook likes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's this whole world out there that we need to be tolerant and accepting of and appreciate the beauty in these things. And so I wasted like 12 years of my life being so intolerant. I think it comes from fear. And I'd love to know what you think about that and how we can specifically get rid of that fear and how that fear also shows up for us at work. You don't have to build on that. You can take us in a completely different direction.
Well, I think that's just talking about fear a little bit more. And I had mentioned earlier the preset templates. I think that there's a big component to the way that we're taught from our parents. And I would say, at least in my case, even from a religious standpoint, where the reason that we should not do things is fear versus some sort of like a higher learning or a higher understanding or building confidence in our internal compass. And I'll give you an example. A parent may, when you're really young, they might teach you and just say, don't ever do this, or you'll get in trouble if you do this. Or when you do something, immediately grounded. But is the explanation of why you shouldn't do it always there? And probably not. And at some level, well, they're too young to understand. And then as time goes on, well, maybe I'm the parent and I said so. And now you're a teenager who's challenging me and you just need to listen to me. But are there opportunities to teach an internal compass versus using fear as and when I say fear of you're going to get grounded, you're going to get in trouble, you're going to hurt yourself, just understanding things from a moral compass standpoint. Because we talked about intimacy last time, I'm going to use another example from school. So I would say that the way that you're taught sex education in public school is fear-based, and the point of it is to not get pregnant. So they're teaching you just enough to understand that you could get some sort of a disease or infection. Here's how it works, but specifically don't do it. Like, it's not really a, hey, here's how to understand this, or to build a moral compass about relationships and when is the right time or things like that. Nope, it's just kind of a like, hey, here's what happens and you will get pregnant and you should be scared of this. I could go over to, religion and I'm going to use, only my own as a case example and say that some of the ways that you are taught to believe are, if you do this thing, and maybe it's a thing that most normal human beings do in secret, or, most normal human beings do, in a moment of weakness or in the privacy of their own homes or whatever, like dishonesty, like So many different things. If you do this, you'll fall out of God's favor, which is fear-based, versus if you do the opposite of that and, develop into a type of person who's loving, who's this or that. That's really like more of a reward-based system. What will happen to you if? And I would say that the reason is it's simple to preach a template. And if you preach a template, you don't have to be concerned with thinking for yourself. You can just follow the template. It's easiest to follow the template. Or you don't have to be concerned with teaching the nuance of how to develop a moral compass. That's tough. There's no real book for that. All of the little things that you might bump into in life, they're not defined in any publication. And so building a moral compass for every situation is difficult. Coming up with a template and saying you don't deviate from the boundaries of this template is easy. So that's where I would assert, is there a point at which, okay, this was easy, now I can take the training wheels off, and if I don't deviate from these boundaries, I'm actually selling myself short as far as what I can be, do, learn, and understand as a human being.
I agree with that. And actually, and I have a Christian faith as well. And just to be clear, I appreciate and am tolerant of all different faiths, and that's my belief system. But in my belief system, what should I be doing? Teaching my kids templates? Maybe some templates, or should I be teaching them to receive revelation and have their own relationship with God and to follow their own conscience and to have their own integrity? I really like the concept of integrity. Somebody once told me having integrity isn't having integrity towards what, like if I have integrity, I'm not having integrity about what you believe. I have integrity about, I have to have a belief system, and then that's my integrity, right? One of my things is I pick up trash. So I'm having integrity because I'm following my belief systems. And I think that's fantastic that you bring that up, because it has to be mine. I earn that for myself. And so same thing with religion and everything else. Same thing with political views. If I didn't earn that, it's really not integrity. I'm just following, right? And I really like that concept. And I feel like, just one more thought, I know your mind's probably teeming with responses, and I said this in a podcast the other day, there are a couple of things that I feel are fact. One is that whatever we believe, the chances are we're likely going to continue to exist after we die. And even if somebody doesn't believe that, and maybe I'm wrong, the safe bet is to go ahead and plan for that. You know what I mean? Like, that's a pretty safe bet. We know scientifically that you can't destroy atoms. We know you can't destroy matter. Any of the science books, any of the scientists out there will say matter has always existed. It just reorganizes. Well, what would be different about our intelligence, right? And so do we want to be progressing, like you said, or being stagnant or going backwards? Everything has consequences, right? So I feel like, and I'll just say this the way I say things, is that God has agency and we have agency, meaning freedom to be our own agents and make our own decisions, right? And that if there is a God, and I believe there is a God, that he is God because he chooses himself good things. Or even if you don't want to call him good, he chooses things that will bring consequences that he wants, right? If you do this, that brings a consequence. Don't like that. If I do this, there are consequences to that come around. And so if we are ever going to attain to that same level of existence, we have to be able to make those same choices, to be led to make those choices for ourselves according to the consequences that we want that are tied to the actions. And I would call it good or bad just because that's an easy distinction. But I really feel like the concept of agency, that we are agents, that we make our own choices, and that we have a future to plan for after this life. And even if we don't know that for a fact, let's just assume that, really brings it into focus that we need to get back to that progress that you're talking about, that you're excited about right now.
Yeah, and I feel that progress is upward movement. And so using teaching platforms, so like using the agency that we have to consider, how can I bring myself to growth or bring myself to new understandings or new beliefs using a positive outlook, spin, positive templates, or understanding like what will be the benefit for myself to follow this path. Or in teaching the way that we bring up our kids, like, hey, don't hit so-and-so because if you do, I'm going to spank you, versus what might so-and-so feel if you hit him or if you steal his toys, what will he still be your friend? Just like understanding, like you said, consequences, but using them in a way that we're like developing or rather blossoming in our understanding of why we do a thing versus this is the boundary of your template.
Yeah.
Don't deviate because there's just trouble on the other side.
And trust me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And trust me because I said so, or things like that. Do we even do that to ourselves sometimes in the beliefs that we choose? Do we do it to our kids in the way that we try to raise them or teach them principles? And is it just to like, hey, trust me, do this thing, which has a place, at some point, kids are so young, they're not going to understand why exactly. But once they're old enough to be asking why, it might be a good time to start, deviating from the track that we're keeping them on for their own safety, and opening up that world of like, I want you to understand why so that you can blossom in the way that you do everything, that you think about everything.
I like that. And you're separating data from decisions, right? And let me see if I can explain this real quick. So like something like drugs, I'm obviously going to warn my kids about drugs, right? But I can do it in two different ways. Like you said, don't do drugs or you're going to hell, right? I've already made a decision here. I've decided for you what you're going to do, and I'm going to use fear to get you to do that same decision that I've made for you. Or, all right, statistically, here's what happens to people that do drugs. These are some of the consequences, right? This is why they do it, because of the feeling, and people do this. Some people have made it work over long periods of time with minimal effects. Most of the time, 70% of the time, it doesn't turn out well. Data. The broad spectrum from the positive to the negative. Now you need to make a decision for your own life according to your integrity versus I've decided you're not doing drugs, right? And to prove that this is your decision and to manipulate you as a human being to not do that and to follow my decision, you're going to hell. I'm going to fear-based tactic you into this, right? Isn't that kind of what you're saying? Data versus decisions? Or how would you say it?
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to phrase it, because yes, I'm talking about, like you said, not just highlighting the negative consequence as a reason, but highlighting the full spectrum so that a person can pick and choose from that full spectrum, and navigate their own, personal signature, their own personal path through life, because that's where the enrichment really is. You believe things that are different from me. I believe things that are different from the next person. And so when we get together and have conversations, I enjoy it so much because I'm like, wow, I never thought of that. That's so interesting to me. Instead of just like, I need to polarize and reject your opinion because it's not my opinion. But with the way we teach people, and I want to kind of expand this right now to, okay, yeah, we're talking about our kids. What about at work? What about our project teams and on our project sites? Do we tell people how and why to do things by like, hey, don't do that because I said so, and if you do, I'll be pissed, is what's going to happen, or I'll fire you, or just or are we like, here's why, here's the full understanding, I need you to make the right choice, I can lead you to the right choice, but the right choice is based on, there are so many more positives if you follow this path. It'll be better for you. It'll be better for the people who are around you if you follow this path. And here's why. I want to touch on the example that you gave about drugs, and like, could you talk to your 6 or 7 year old and tell him, hey, here's this illicit drug in front of you. Some people can do it in moderation and not have that bad of effects on their life. No, you can't really explain the nuance of that to somebody who's young. You may have to provide a template or boundaries for them. But just going back into what is it that helps us develop as human beings? Is it, that allowing our concepts of what we believe to blossom into a bigger, brighter, and fuller understanding of how we affect ourselves and how we affect others on the grand scale. So, is it good and bad as a black and white, polarized, you're here, I'm there? Or is it understanding and relating to each other and understanding and relating to concepts by navigating that spectrum in between those kind of predetermined boundaries and figuring out how to relate best to this person, that person, and ourselves?
I like that. And there was one day I was in one of our temples, and there's in the temples there's baptistries. There's a baptismal font, and underneath the baptistry, underneath the baptismal font, there's 12 oxen, and it symbolizes the 12 tribes of Israel. Anyway, something that came to my mind through revelation is what I believe is that we protect our children the same way up to a certain point. Like if you have literal oxen or cows or elephants or bison out in the wild, then what they do is the older ones will provide a protective circle around the young ones until they're old enough to go out and make their own choices. And then they have the opportunity to actually have A or B, right? I feel like sometimes if we shove a kid into a certain circumstance, we're just giving them one choice. But if we let them grow up a little bit, protect them a little bit, right? Not fear-based, but just shield them just a little bit. And then they're old enough to actually say, here's A, here's B, I'm going to go make my own choice. I think that's fantastic. Just like those younger bison, once they're old enough to protect themselves from the wolves, they can stay with the herd and be safer, or they can go out on their own and create their own environment. But if you push those little ones out without protection early, the only choice that you gave them was to be eaten by wolves, right? You know what I mean? Like they're not going to survive. It's a statistical fact. So I really like that point. But keep going. You're on a riff.
Another view that I think has just kind of become more interesting to me as time progresses is there are also cultural concepts of what's good and what's bad. And those cultural concepts, they evolve over time. I feel like it's been pretty well accepted that murder is bad, throughout different cultures, throughout time. But what else meant good or bad might be, there are things which are acceptable here, which are totally unacceptable, in India, for instance, just from a cultural standpoint, as far as maybe how men or women can act, what they're able to be or how they speak publicly, like different things. Like views are different in different parts of the world. So what's bad here is not what's bad in another country, or what's bad now is not necessarily what was bad 40 years ago. So just understanding also when I'm talking about, like, is there a spectrum in between black and white to navigate that has more to do with like the personal compass of our heart or our understanding? I feel that supersedes time and culture, because you can understand what's good and what's acceptable in a culture and abide by that. You can understand and interpret what's good and acceptable in a time period per se, and abide by that, versus having to have one set of, this is always good, this is always bad, you should never do this, you can always do this. Those things change and update themselves over time. How do you feel about that?
I like that. And I don't know if I'm getting too far off track here, but I feel like the concept of us being on our journey and actually, appreciating the journey and not just the destination. Actually, no, like appreciating the journey and not the destination is really something that's been on my mind lately. And so if there are different time periods in different cultures, and there are, there are, they are on a journey. And are we going to go over and look at them and either be jealous and hate them if they're farther ahead on their journey or farther behind on their journey, or on a completely different path, just in a completely different terrain, right? They might be making progress, but it's so far removed. They're walking through a forest. We're walking through a desert. It looks so different, right? But they're progressing forward. I think you called it an upward path of progress. What was the exact words you used on that? If it comes to you, let me know. But
I already lost it.
okay, but a couple of things here, and I know we're going back to religion, and I hope we don't lose a lot of podcast listeners, but rather that people appreciate what we're talking about. But there's a couple things I've come to know, is that heaven will not and cannot be, if it exists, and I believe it does, it cannot be a place where we're stagnant. It won't. It will not be that. Like, that is something I know for sure. We're not going to be happy as human beings the way we're wired, just sitting around doing nothing for eternity. Now, will we have breaks? Yes. Will we have fun? Yes. Will we do things? But I believe that the happiness comes just like it does on earth from giving. And you brought up that point earlier on, right? And the things that you got that you appreciated from your religion is giving, doing good things, being helpful, being kind, making sure that you're improving other people's lives, right? I feel like, and I know I'm doing this, Brandon, in a way that's pretty dogmatic, right? But these are my beliefs. I feel like we're going to continue to make progress and to serve and to give and to love and to help, and that we're going to have barbecues and holidays, and we're going to be being kind to people, and we're going to be helping others along their journey. So this concept of the journey, to me, is what makes it all worthwhile, right? Without the journey, heaven doesn't exist, failure doesn't exist, nothing exists. Like, without the journey, like, that's it. That's the center focus of our lives. And so I feel like, for me, and I'm not going to put this on anyone else, if I stop in my journey and if I say, here is it, this is all that I'm going to do, I'm going to sit on the side of this path and just plunk myself down here, and that's it, I think that's kind of sad. I wouldn't warn somebody about that with fear-based techniques, but I would do like you said and say, learning lean and eliminating waste and giving and having a goal and learning new things and accomplishing new things and getting new friends. Like, come on, this is so fun, right? And so I don't think it's wise. And in fact, I don't believe it. And I'm going to say it anyway to be authentic. And if I lose podcast listeners, I guess that's what we do. But I don't believe ever and never will in that concept of, if you don't believe what I believe, or if you're not on my same path, you go to hell. I quite frankly think that's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I don't believe it. My church doesn't believe it. The gospel that I believe in doesn't believe that. I don't believe God believes it. And I just don't think it exists. Like, it can't be true. It's not true. And so if we can embrace the fact that everyone's on their separate journeys, and then switch it from judging what kind of path they have, what kind of trail they're following, where they are in the path compared to us, and instead saying, I'll help you on whatever path you're on, I think that's when life could really get remarkable. And I believe that that's what God does with us. He doesn't say, oh, you're not perfect. Oh, I'm done with you. He's like, okay, Jason, you're way back here. Your next step is this, and next step is this. And he doesn't judge me by where I could be in 20 years ago. He's saying, take your next step from where I am right now. And so that's the system, that's the structure that I put my mind into. And so I absolutely agree. Different time period, different culture, different belief systems. Help them along their path. Don't condemn them or tell them they're going to hell or discard them or throw them away because they have a different experience than you do. That's my thoughts, Brent. Did I answer that okay? Or like,
yeah, for sure. And, I want to say, for myself personally, it's probably evident that I have, mostly become disassociated from my Christian-based faith, although I still consider myself to be a spiritual person. In many ways, my personal development, my goodness is very important to me. And it's very important that I can either look at myself in the mirror from an accountability standpoint, or when I put my head on my pillow at night, know that I have been a good person today.
Yeah.
Or that I wake up and look at myself and I know that I'm going to be a good person because I have, I want to say intrinsic values, but values that I have inculcated in myself over time and hold myself accountable to a standard. Or again, using that concept of like an internal compass and saying, my internal compass points in the direction of goodness, period. And that I appreciate and knowing you and I love you and appreciate you very much as a person and as a friend. And so I would say, like, how I feel. I've never felt like you were just like, hey, it'd be a lot cooler if you believed this way, or I haven't felt that you're, pushy in your thoughts or beliefs or anything, or that you're just like, no, this guy, he's really cool, but he can't actually be good because he doesn't believe how I believe. So I appreciate that. You mentioned something about like different cultures, different times coming along. Maybe there's somewhere else in their path. I want to give a little example that reminds me of that. So I had the opportunity to do some out of the country construction work. I was in Colombia, just outside of Bogota, working on some multi-level or multifamily housing. And although they had brought in a few like internationals to do some of the control work, like grid lines and just some other like surveying type things that I was doing, quality control. The people who were building the structure were locals, and the tools that they were using were, I'm going to call them local tools, in that a lot of them were made out of rebar. They had made them at home just with a grinding wheel. Maybe they had cool ways of like bending a rebar and mounting little studs on it so that they could use hacksaw blades. Most of their rain gear was made out of trash bags. I know some people had plumb bobs that were made from ground down rebar just hanging from a piece of string. I saw all kinds of different things. But what I also saw was, at the end of a day, there was a building that was there that was inhabitable, that was completely livable, that was up to spec, that was quality controlled. And, the methods and tools, someone else from a different country might look at that and just be like, that's not good somehow. It's just not good enough. Or it could be better. It's not this, it's not that. Or compare it to their own structure. But like, hey, this structure is, not only is it good, in terms of, and I want to say, like, let's talk about those different paths. This was their path and they nailed it. In fact, they excelled at it. And the building that was left behind is beautiful. And so they, were able to accomplish something for themselves using their methods, their tools, their way, and got us there. We could all stand somewhere else from a different set of, overall values from a construction perspective and just be like, oh, not good enough. Says who? The people there in that path, they're achieving success. They're feeling the success for themselves. Because they've done things correct and according to their, values, principles, traditions, etc. And I like to think about that example like, there's 100 different ways to skin a cat, which I think is mean. Don't ever skin cats. But they're all out there. And so is it the same in the way that we, like you said, when we look at other people's value systems, faiths, different sides of the political spectrum, do we have to polarize them and say, I need to cast my, ballot, this is good or this is bad? Or can we appreciate the way they do things, appreciate the values that we, see in them and like, yeah, that is really positive. I see why that benefited them, et cetera. How much better it is to support those different paths than to feel like we need to polarize. And could we learn something? Definitely, always. We can learn something from a different way something's done. We could understand something from a different way things are done. So I really appreciate that I had that example, and like I apply it in things that I look at all over life because I feel like it has, just relevancy all over.
Well, I totally agree. And I feel like and we're out of time now, but this has been a fantastic podcast. But here's what I'm excited about. We have so much more we can talk about the next time, Brandon. Like, we're going to keep going on this. The thought that came to me, and I'd like you to give a closing statement and then tell us where we're headed, which is onward, is so that, like, let's say from a political standpoint, like, we're all going out to vote, right? What if Democrats and Republicans work together? What if instead of all this fear-based, like fear mongering, what if everyone listened to each other? And I know that sounds a little bit like idealistic, but what if Republicans said to Democrats, okay, all of these social systems, we get this, let's have some conversations, but we also want the same freedoms and liberties for the people that want to be more conservative in their lives, right? Let's strike a balance and be equal on both sides. And what if Democrats said to Republicans, hey, okay, I get the financial, conservative items. I get that we need to do a couple of things for immigration, but let's not be so stuck on our belief systems that we don't listen to things like, about police brutality. We don't listen to things when it comes to social reform. Let's be a little bit more open to some of those ideas, right? And let's get a couple of reforms in here that our people need, right? What if each side said, this is what I'm afraid of. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? Still believe separate things, but like come together, right? How much better would our world be? And I feel like that same and help each other on their journey, right? What if Republicans helped Democrats on their journey and helped improve that platform? What if vice versa, that it was the same and the other way around? And then what if on our project sites, instead of being polarized against workers or a certain trade or a certain type of person or a certain image of person or a certain region or whatever, or a contractor that's just new and maybe doesn't have as much experience. Like on a podcast the other day, I told a true story of how I helped put my wife's father out of business. They were a new contractor and we didn't help them. We just put them out of business. And so in construction with workers, are we helping them on their journey or are we polarized against them? With contractors that are new, are we helping them on their journey or are we polarized against them? With other contractors, are we learning from them and sharing, or are we polarized against them? And so I think this concept of the journey, of acceptance, of tolerance, and of being focused on the right things and helping each other could really help us. And so I'd like you to close this out and have the final word here, Brandon. What would you say? And if you forget, I'll remind you about what would be your challenge to anyone listening.
I would say, number one, let's part two this, because we talked about the navigation of the grays, maybe without having like predetermined boundaries on ourselves, or even an internal compass, or if that internal compass is religion or spirituality, where it takes us. I think it would be really valuable to talk about. And my challenge would be for everyone. So then what does it mean? If what we're saying is maybe less attention to the polars or those preset templates that we're comfortable with or that make it easy for us to decide where we want to be, for you as an individual to think about, what do you believe that it takes to make a good person? Maybe not even focusing so much on the word bad. What do you think it takes to make a good person? Have you thought about that? I know we've talked a lot about accountability. Accountability is a huge catch-all. It means we're true to our word. It means that we're honest in the way that we deal and think about ourselves. It means we hold ourselves to a standard. Like there's a big catch-all there. But what are those little things that we as individuals think, this is what makes me good? And when I go to bed at night, I put my head on the pillow and I can say, I've been a good person today. What is it, a belief system, or is it something in between, your secret sauce let's call it, for yourself, where you feel like this recipe is right and I achieved this today?
I love that. So let me interrupt your final statement here. I would say that after listening to this podcast or listening to you, mine is I'm a good person when I help others on their path. What would you say if you had to say it in one sentence?
I'm the worst one sentence person you've ever met in your entire life. You know, the quote, if I had more time, it would have been shorter. The letter or the correspondence. I'm afraid I'm the opposite person, but I'm working on that one. It's very hard.
Well, podcast, it does us well, but go.
Yeah, I would say this. I in fact wanted to ask the question or make the challenge. Do we have a responsibility to help others? Is that part of what makes us good? Is that in our belief system? It's really easy to be, we're all self-centric to some extent. In our heads, we're thinking our own thoughts. We're interpreting other people's thoughts through our own lens or filter. We make assumptions based on, how we were raised, what we think on a topic, etc. So of course we're self-focused, but do we have to be good, to quantify ourselves as a good human being? Do we have a responsibility to help others, and to what extent do we feel that responsibility? So I want to assert yes, but I want everyone to think about that. To what extent do you feel obligated? Not even obligated. Screw that word. Do you have a personally assigned responsibility to be a good person, to help others? To what extent?
Well, that's fantastic. I hope you have anybody listening to this, have enjoyed this content today, just like I have. And Brandon, we got to get our timing right. So we're going to say on we go, but it's on the count of three. So 1, 2, 3. On
we go.
Thank you.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.